Hello and welcome to another episode of Drive With Me, probably more accurately described as angry, privileged white man bitches about politics while he's driving to work in the morning. But nonetheless, I don't really have a specific agenda for this particular channel or these videos. For all I care, these could effectively just be zero view video journals that I watch again years from now when I'm drunk or high and possibly divorced for a good laugh. So onward and upward, as they say. So today I actually wanted to discuss everybody's favorite, now trillionaire, at least on paper, Mr. Elon Musk, and basically how things are going there, because it actually involves some shady shit that is impacting any of us with any kind of investment in the market, like index funds in particular. So largely that's going to apply to those with retirement plans, right? 401ks, 403bs, etc., right? And so it was interesting. I was just learning about this recently. And so the SpaceX IPO, went gangbusters and super, the stock is worth a lot, right? And that's what kicked Elon Musk into, at least on paper, being the world's first trillionaire. And it was interesting because apparently the rules were rewritten for much of the stock market. And so there's different index organizations, if you will. I don't know if they're separate companies or exactly how it works, but so like the Dow Jones is separate from the S&P 500, right? So while they're all part of the New York Stock Exchange, they are different exchanges. I don't even know what the word is, to be entirely honest. I'm not an investor. And I'm not like a day trader or anything like that, so I actually don't know what the word is for it. But they are different tickers. They're different specific things on the New York Stock Exchange, right? And my understanding is they tend to focus on different things. Like the Dow Jones is literally full name and includes the industrial average, and apparently involves mostly industrial or production-based companies. The S&P 500, I believe, represents like 500 of the largest or highest net worth or whatever it is, highest revenue corporations in the country, etc. I believe that's kind of how it works. That's my understanding. Don't quote me on that, but nonetheless, the point is they're different. So SpaceX, Elon Musk's company, IPO'd, and apparently to be willing to do so, he required, if you will, he pushed the S&P 500 to rewrite its rules. And so typically, when there is a company that is added, the IPO, just to back up a little bit, is an initial public offering, right? Which just means this is just the asking value of the stock when it first starts trading, right? That's it. That's all an IPO is. It's now trading. This is what we're asking for. And then the market responds to it. Investors either grab it or don't. And typically, my understanding is it's usually a minimum of 90 days. I believe the typical value is around a year until the stock kind of stabilizes. It does ups and downs and so on often when it first is introduced to the market and takes some time to stabilize. So by the time it's added to the what's known as the index, or the collection of companies that are on that given exchange, like the S&P 500, it gives it time to stabilize, so it isn't really screwing with investors and they're not buying high and selling low on unintentionally or what have you. Right? So it helps provide some stability to the market. So Elon Musk pushed to have these rules rewritten so that the company, SpaceX, could be indexed as early as 15 trading days. That's 3 weeks after it IPOs, right? And so the thing about indexes is that if you're an individual investor, you can choose which companies you want to specifically invest in, right? You can even technically do that as a small investor. But if you are a retirement plan, the vast majority of virtually all of them that I'm aware of that invest in the market, which is the vast majority of retirement plans nowadays, they buy into indexes, which is a diversified portfolio from an entire exchange, right? Or sub-exchange, whatever the heck they're called, like the S&P 500, the Dow Jones, government bonds. They usually have diversified assets so that if one or two of them really takes a dip, your retirement should still generally climb, because overall it's doing well and there's still profit being made and investments still happening and so on, right? That's the general idea. So, but if you have a company that knows it can force effectively retirement plans to buy into its shares because it will be joining the index within just 3 weeks, it's going to motivate individuals that are doing so to ask for a way higher initial public offering, which is exactly what we're seeing. So OpenAI and what's the other one? Claude or whatever. There's a Anthropic, I think, is another one, something like that. Anyway, there are a variety of AI companies that are preparing the IPO. I believe Google, Alphabet, its parent company, is like spinning off a portion of itself to re-IPO so that it can take advantage of these rules. SpaceX did really, really well. And apparently there have been a lot of complaints because it impacts a lot of people. But the fundamental idea is that it forces indexes to buy in, or index-based plans like retirement plans to buy in while the value of the company is really high, and then you get to go on that whole roller coaster of ups and downs. And traditionally, by the time the stock stabilizes, it is very common, in fact usual, for it to be lower than it was when it initially was publicly offered, right? Which is where that whole idea comes from, that you're basically forced to buy high and trade or sell low. And that's kind of what the market has traditionally been designed to not allow for, and what Elon Musk has almost single-handedly now allowed to become the norm, which is just another way to pilfer the funds and basically take publicly available trading money that is there for our retirements as a middle class, and yet allow yet another mechanism of siphoning those funds up to the top, because wealthy investors can play that market. They can choose to not invest in a full index, right? Sometimes just a batch of the highest performing, or the dividend kings, for example, and so on, or even individual companies. And you don't have to buy the full index, right? But if you are trading on a full index, then you are required to buy shares of the entire, it's just automatic, right? When you buy into the index, which is a collection of companies again, you will automatically be buying into SpaceX. So now, many of us, like myself, that has a modest 403b retirement plan, I probably have some kind of micro shares or partial shares of SpaceX that are probably not going to be as valuable 6 months from now. And it's probably going to slow down the growth of retirement accounts for a lot of Americans. And when there's a downturn or a bubble that pops in the market, it's going to hit all of us more than likely harder. Smaller at first, right? It won't be very noticeable at the beginning, but over time it really will be. And funny thing is that this is but the latest in a series of decades-long efforts by the ultra wealthy to weaponize or purposely optimize markets to make them wealthier while hurting the rest of us. It isn't even just, well, if the middle class, like if we do well, the middle class does well. No, they actually play it routinely like something of a zero-sum game, whereas they want to get wealthy faster, and that means they have to hurt many of us in the process, whether it be through merging and then raising prices as you've effectively cornered the market, effectively, even if you're technically skirting legal bounds, effectively price fixing and gouging customers in regards to groceries or any number of different things, right? Like meat is effectively controlled, like chicken, for example, and beef, and a lot of agriculture and produce and grocery in general is, and even your home, like toiletries and things like that, right? A lot of stuff, your food companies, like fast food companies and restaurants, and tons of these companies, entertainment companies, your telecoms, your cell phone companies, and cell phone providers, right? As an example, all over the place. Many of these are divided up purposely so that there's limited competition, and then they merge to basically gain a variety, a larger market share and larger amount of intellectual property, depending on what it is they're dealing with. And then they predictably raise prices more than what would have happened if those two companies had stayed separate, right? Because that's often the claim, right? That, well, now that you have two services in one, it only makes sense that we raise the price. You'd be paying double for this kind of content anyway. But eventually, because they don't have as much real competition, they end up raising it more. And you see this time and time again across industries, and it's often a fairly slow process. but it's really hitting hard in the 2020s because we've had decades of this. It really started in the 1970s when you started having a real push towards deregulating industries, trucking and railways and railroads, that is, and freight movement and so on. They deregulated a lot of this, which really what it tended to mean was make it easier for big corporations to make money and have fewer worker protections and requirements on these companies to actually do things that could slow them down. And they called it being beneficial to innovation. But the only real innovation that was there was how to better exploit and their workers, decrease labor costs, and maximize profits. That's the innovation that is and has always been there. Most innovation that is adopted by various industries is usually created on the outside of that industry or on the fringes of it, often by nonprofits, through government research, etc., and then is often imposed on them either by large competitors finally adopting it because the cost, the risk to reward ratio changes, such as like solar panels is a good example of that happening now, where it's now more cost efficient to invest in solar panels. And so even your very profit-minded companies are starting to switch more towards renewables, even though they've put a lot of money, a lot of Exxon Mobil money has gone towards hurting solar or hurting the tax benefits you get for installing solar and so on, state by state. They do it at a federal level, but they also do it at a state level and even municipal levels. And so anyway, and then I also heard about Delaware recently allowing corporations to, at a municipal level, to basically create a variety of shell companies, split up land that they have, and then each entity, each individual shell company with land can vote, right? So literally we're allowing companies to vote, corporations to vote at a municipal level, at least in Delaware. But it is a strategy that is being apparently implemented and planned to be expanded throughout the United States. And the reality is that municipal or local politics is ultimately builds on itself to state and federal level politics. National politics is a consolidation of local politics, right? So that's often what they do. They rarely do it in your face in such a way that it really angers a lot of people. Though, funnily enough, a caveat is I was actually just reading that apparently there's been a lot of backlash to this S&P 500 SpaceX IPO, the rules that were rewritten to allow the company to index earlier. And apparently there's been a lot of pushback about it, and I'm not sure that the rules have really been changed back or what have you, but at least there's been a lot of pushback, and the S&P 500 has acknowledged they're, reviewing things or what have you. So maybe that there may be some good news there, but even then, that would be an example of just billionaire, multi-billionaire overreach that actually pisses off enough people that there's pushback. Still an example of an incredible amount of corruption. And it's not like I'm just going to pick on one billionaire here. You have Bill Gates that has been, and Warren Buffett that have these good, real squeaky clean image typically is how they try to portray themselves, because these billionaires hire public relations teams that go out of their way to try to make them seem better than they are, and really just exemplify all of their positive traits and all the philanthropy work that they do and so on, which is really just another excuse and way to hold on to more of their money because they don't want to give it away in taxes. And they have a lot more control over people if they can control the money, right? And they know this, and they fight hard to keep it. So, bottom line is, billionaires, bad, generally speaking. And it's not just because they're billionaires. Part of it is the kind of people that become billionaires tend to be more likely to have those dark triad traits. A little bit more sociopathic, a bit more selfish, a little bit more Machiavellian, where you don't really care about other people and you're just trying to play the practical game to win. That said, you also have the nature of that kind of money tends to corrupt people. So it's a bit of both. It's the people that get there tend to be more prone to it. And once you are there, you're almost definitely going to be susceptible to it. It takes a very specific kind of person to really not care, right? But most of those people are middle class, regular workers, and they don't have a lot of power. So it's funny, the people you would want with that power are the ones that aren't going to seek it by and large. And unfortunately, this is human nature, and you've seen it time and time again. It is a tale as proverbially old as more or less the human race as we know it. So, this nature of this greed, this corruption that really permeates every level of our country and our economy, and this heroic treatment that we have for billionaires and the ultra wealthy, and that ultimately we all just need to buckle down and work harder and be smarter and be entrepreneurs, and we can join this billionaire class too, instead of holding the billionaire class accountable, because they are fundamentally in many respects parasitic in various ways. It's just the reality of being a billionaire is no person on this planet produces enough on their own to justify having the resources of a billionaire. It is by nature at least semi-parasitic. Not that they are not highly valuable people, but they are gaining value disproportionately from the work and productivity of other people and other technologies, right? And that we financialized it and turned it into what is damn near a video game. And money has little real value in many markets nowadays, which is, I think, part of the reason why you see such a kind of a longing on the part of many Americans and many people around the world to kind of return to a simpler era of bartering and farming and homesteading and so on. It's why my wife and I are really getting into gardening lately. It's a way, it's for our own mental health, for a kind of a way of trying to produce more of our own food, having more control over our lives to offset many of the increases in groceries that we've dealt with, especially over the last 6 years throughout the 2020s. And just so on. There's just a variety of reasons, but these kind of stories really just exemplify why there's that movement. And often we are pushed into blaming each other. We're pushed into blaming even politicians sometimes that really are just a symptom of the problem. We're pushed into blaming immigrants, and we're pushed into blaming, women that are just, feminism has gone crazy. And a lot of these things are often, there's actually some objective truth to some of them. Like, we really should reform our immigration system. We really should have a much better immigration process, and one that discourages coming over here illegally, and one that encourages coming over here legally. That requires reform because our current system is broken, right? Same thing with education, right? It needs to be reformed. Our tax code needs to be reformed. Our healthcare system needs to be reformed, et cetera, et cetera. And the funny thing is that it actually tends to benefit, up to a point, benefits billionaires and benefits the ultra wealthy by not doing anything about it, because keeping us angry and divided and arguing and bickering amongst ourselves about how to fix these things keeps us off of their asses collectively. So funnily enough, the dysfunction breeds dysfunction, and we are making it worse by not actually looking at the culprit, which is greed and money, and who controls the money and is able to best exploit greed. Those at the top. And who are those at the top? Those that are generally multi-billionaires, multi-generational centibillionaire and families, your Waltons and your DuPonts and so on, and probably people that we've never even heard of. Like, there's, of course, lots of conspiracies around your, like, Rothschilds and some of your old money families and what the kind of crap they get up to. And who knows, maybe there is really some kind of blood-drinking, Satan-worshipping cult out there who friggin', I don't know. I can't speak to it one way or another. It seems pretty far-fetched to me, but nonetheless, there's a huge amount of corruption, and they are actively hurting and leading to the death of millions of people because of this greed and corruption that is being implemented on down the line. So at a certain point, we need to wake up, and while I'd prefer to not literally eat the rich, we do need to overthrow this greedy system. One way or another, it's going to collapse. Either we do it or it collapses, and then we are going to angrily respond, French Revolution style. Something's going to happen and something's going to break. So we need to start preparing for this individually, as families, as people, as collectives. Try to start forming co-ops, whether businesses, farming collectives, whatever, right? Like, what have you. There are a variety of ways. Mutual aid programs. There's a whole bunch of different. Community compost can even be helpful, and community volunteer and helping each other is really, like, community is what's going to bring a lot of this back. Caring about each other and not allowing ourselves to be divided along political lines really is what. It's a way easier said than done, and I'm not saying anything that's revolutionary at all. But I do hope that a lot of these conversations just kind of help bring it home. Just how important this stuff is. We need a cultural shift of mind to actually, and it's difficult. It is. It's even difficult for me. I get tied up in a lot of this stuff too often. But it's important to take a lot of the bad and the negative and the frustrating and the corruption and the news that we have and that which divides us, and try to be aware of it, cognizant of where this is coming from, who this benefits, and then how we respond to it in a way that gives power and empowerment in general back to the rest of us, back to those of us that do not have it. And we really should start seeing ourselves that way, is that by and large we have the ability to exert power collectively, but we're not doing it very well now. And we have a system that has purposely been kind of carved and hollowed out to a point where we're pretty much unable to exercise a whole lot of power without a very, very purposeful, collective, and precise exertion of that anger and that power. And that's something we're not doing very well. They've really blunted it, and that's on purpose. So protesting even really doesn't do much. I don't know that it ever really did, but it's definitely been blunted even further, and the media has an almost clockwork, very well planned and well organized way of responding to a lot of these things that could be perceived as threats to the power regime that currently exists. So with that in mind, hope y'all are doing well. I gotta back off of my soapbox, and hope you all have a good rest of your day, because I am at my. I know I don't really talk about it, but I record these on the way to work. So I am now at work, and I gotta go get through my work day. So you all take care, and we can do this. We can make things better. We'll get there. I really truly believe it. It's just a matter of when and how much damage and violence is done in the meantime. I hope that the answer is little. I hope that the United States is able to reform itself as peacefully as possible, but it's not going to be an easy process regardless of what it looks like. So, all right, thanks again. If you guys want to hear more about politics and economics and corruption and greed and how to change this country and so on, and just have a general conversation about how to make this place better for ourselves and future generations, stick around, because we'll be talking about it. Take care.